With everything going on in the world right now, we all need to make sure that we're taking the time to prioritize our own self-care. So on this special episode of Impact Theory, we've gathered self-care tips from some of our incredible guests to help you guys incorporate these practices into your own life. So get ready to prioritize you with our first guest, the one and only Les Brown.
The easiest thing I've done was to get out from under the labels and to live the life that I live. The most difficult thing I've ever done was to believe that I can do it.
What's the difference?
The difference is that when you don't know what's impacting you, and it's something that's holding you down and you're not aware of it. The great anthropologist Margaret Mead was in a restaurant in London, and a guy was serving her and said, "There are several Americans here tonight." And she said, "Is that right?" "Yeah." "So let me know when you serve them dessert. I'll tell you exactly how many are here." He said, "Oh, you couldn't possibly." And so he came back and said, "Okay, I've done it." And she got up and she walked around and she came back and she said, "There are around 25 here." And he looked at the roster. "How did you know that?" Say, "In America, we eat differently from you when we eat a dessert. You eat it from the crust toward the tip. We eat it from the tip toward the crust. When you eat a slice of pie, how do you eat yours?"
Definitely, yeah, from the tip back to the crust, for sure.
Yeah, okay, and so there are things that when you, in my situation, when you live in a dominant culture that is designed to destroy your sense of self and your belief in yourself, and you have to learn ways in which you can begin to connect with this power that you have within yourself to handle where you are. The key is to be constantly in a perpetual process of discovering the truth of who you are and fighting constantly to look for ways in which you can escape the inner conversation.
So why is movement specifically so important to mental well-being?
I almost don't even know where to begin with this. I mean, you can start with the data. If you just look at the data around the world, every country you can imagine that it has been studied in, every age group, every health status, every gender, every socioeconomic status, people who are more physically active are happier, they have better relationships, they have more meaning in life, they're less at risk for things like depression and loneliness. If you go further than just sort of that kind of epidemiology, and you look at how movement affects the brain and how movement affects mental health, it's as if humans were born to move, and when we are physically active, it puts us in a state of not just body, but of mind to be the best version of ourselves. You know, everything from the neurochemistry of the runner's high, which makes us enjoy cooperating with other people more and gives us hope and optimism, all the way to how if you are regularly active, you have a different brain and nervous system than people who don't exercise. You have a brain and a nervous system that are more sensitive to pleasure and more resilient to stress. I think the biggest takeaway is that human beings, as individuals and as a species, we thrive when we are active, that our brains aren't just housed in bodies like...
Where does the hypothesis that our brains were created to move us come from?
Yeah, this is an idea that I feel like you can't even explain it. This is an idea that if you look at the structure and the function of the brain, everything that humans do other than think is a form of movement. You know, communicating, language, emotion expressions, labor, finding food, celebration, procreation, it's all a physical action. And the idea is basically, other than think and ruminate and plan, that there is no other reason to have a brain except to interact with the world. And even like thinking is subservient to our ability to engage with the world. And so basically we have a brain that scaffolds every type of interaction we have with the world, which is movement. And I think it's not even like a fancy idea, that just is true.
So some of the things you talk about in the book in terms of the consequences of the way that we're interacting with our digital devices, it's, if you're right about the cause, it's pretty terrifying. And I don't think anyone's going to argue the sort of realities about mental health issues, about attempted or hospitalizations due to attempted suicide. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think it's getting stark that having this thing as a constant companion is not good for us. And what's important about this to understand is that it's also not fundamental. So this behavior of constantly looking at the phone is not intrinsic to this technology. In fact, we had both social media and smartphones for years before it became normal to look at your phone all the time. The reason we do that, and this is the behavior that's causing all these issues, the reason we do that is that around the point when the major social media platforms were preparing for their IPOs, they completely re-engineered the social media experience. So instead of it being about posting and reading your friend's post, it became about this steady incoming stream of social approval indicators, like likes and retweets and photo tags and comments. And so now you had a reason to keep going back to the phone, because every time you hit this, there might be another reward there, another indication of social approval. None of that was in the original social media model, but they added it because it changed it from something you checked every once in a while to something that you checked all the time. And it was really hard to resist. And then that changed our entire relationship with these devices. And so now we think about it as something we look at all the time. It sort of trained us to think of it like this constant companion that we always need to be looking at in every downtime. But that's very recent and it's very contrived, and it's causing a lot of trouble.
So how do we begin to carve out that space for solitude? Are there things that we can do? I know you've talked about walking. Like, what are some things that people can do to train themselves? Because obviously now most people are in a very, like you said, Pavlovian response cycle where it's not going to happen by accident for them to stop. So how do they break out of that, and what can they do to reintroduce solitude?
Well, just for the issue of solitude, it's pretty easy to get it back. All you have to do is on a regular basis, do something without your phone. You basically go back to about 10 years ago. Not all the time, but just occasionally, right? So maybe when you walk the dog at some point, like, I'm not gonna bring my phone, you're going to the drugstore, I'm not gonna bring my phone. Like, just have some activity you do most days without your phone, even if it's 20 minutes. There you're already getting little doses of solitude. You're breaking the complete solitude deprivation syndrome.
One thing that I see in your story that I think is really powerful, and I really want to take a second to drill down into it, is you're way intense. And you've said that, one thing I have to remind myself every night, and we'll talk about feminine and masculine energy a little bit later, but you have to remind yourself to soften back up at the end of the night. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. So you've got this, I really like the titles, I really want to go after it, I'm way intense, I want to win, I'm all in. Getting in that kind of shape is brutally difficult, but then at the same time you can balance it with the playfulness, and it's not all about that. How have you learned to strike that balance, and maybe more importantly, how do you teach other people to do that?
I've learned if I don't learn to strike that balance, that when I go too extreme in either one, I'm not happy. I feel very scattered, I feel frantic, I feel crazy. So I think that for me, when I start feeling a little bit chaotic, so for me it shows up in a very like grasping for straws. Things aren't happening, like I'm running into a wall, like the feeling of banging your head against a wall. That's what it feels like for me. And I know a lot of people can relate to that, and I think especially a lot of people in fitness might get into it to kind of like, maybe they're anxious or it calms their nerves, because I think I run really on the anxious side. So for me, if I don't learn how to control that, I'll go to the extreme of something. So it's a must for me. I actually think it's a must for everyone to kind of find how to dance in the different categories of your life, because we're not just one thing. And when we go all in on one thing, we're severely neglecting the other parts of us, which makes for an empty human, which makes for someone who never feels full. So I have to remember that there's so many parts of me that I need to make sure that I'm fulfilling. For me, play is so important. And when I was first building my business and when I was really getting into the fitness world, I neglected play, and I love being a weirdo. I love being a goofball. I love being funny. And I thought that I had to suppress that side of me in order to win, in order to be successful. College was frowned upon, and like really restrictive religion. So for me, I think that in order to win and be successful, I thought that I had to just shut down the goofy. I had to be a certain way. I had to just drive so hard. And what happened is the driving got me somewhere. Drive, do it. And you know, the voice in my head was like, it was very like a hardcore coach, which would get me somewhere, but there was no joy along the way. So every time I'd wind up somewhere, I was like, well, I thought this would be way better than when I'm actually here. And that wasn't even fun. Was it even worth it? And now it's never enough. It's like never enough. And I just felt so empty as well, because this part of me that I loved that side of me. I loved the silly, goofy side. It's like, that's when that feeling of really liking yourself and feeling alive. That's when I feel most connected to people. And that was another moment of, okay, I really think that all of my power might be in the complete vulnerability. And when I started sharing my story more of, you know, I still have anxiety. Like literally when I sat in this chair, I was like, oh dang, like there's the wave again. I still have massive anxiety. I'm like a massive weirdo. When I started sharing those things, the people just came flooding in because they can see you. Like they can finally see who you are.
Why are you so good at relationships? Like, what are a few of the things that make you bond with people as quickly as you do?
Oof. I always come back to, there must be an intention there. So the intention, where did the intention come from? So the intention for me came from, you know, when I was on my deathbed, and in, you know, 2 times in my life I thought I was gonna die. And the one that gave me the greatest gift was the did I love part of did I live, did I love, did I matter? I saw scenes of my life when I thought I was gonna die. I saw scenes of my life when I was surrounded by the people that I loved. And my instant feeling was, I'm gonna miss them. And they're gonna miss me. And I'm dying, and that's so sad. And that was as important as, did I live my life or did I make a difference? It was like, I'm so sad. And I got that as a 19-year-old kid. Like a breakup of a relationship sent me into suicide. That realization was like, oh my God, at the end, all you're gonna wonder is about your family and your friends and people you loved, and all they're gonna miss you. So I got early that one of the objectives of this game has to be deep relationships, because you're gonna see scenes of your life surrounded by people you love at the very end. And I'm like, so live your life so it's this epic, beautiful movie. And so I think that was where the intention came from, was I just wanted to have great relationships. The second is, I'm so good at recognizing how awesome people are. You know, I have a talent finding capability of just goodness. Like you know it, you've been in my world. I don't attract assholes. Like they're nowhere, I'm too annoying. I'm too happy for them. There's too much positive psychology happening, so the assholes are like, I don't like that guy. They don't come to my seminars. They don't buy my stuff. I repel all the jerks. And I'm super lucky by that. I don't know if it's the way I look or the way that I talk. I think the other aspect is all I want to do, and what I realized early on from reading personal development books, is your life creates a ripple. And so I'm always trying to realize that maybe I can make somebody smile today, and now when they go home, they're nicer to the kid. That's a real thing.
I had a really good friend of mine, I went to lunch, and he said, I don't know who this guy is here in front of me. And he goes, let me ask you a question, honestly. Right now, what are you grateful for? And at the lunch, I said, jack shit. Nothing, brother. There's nothing good in my life right now. And I'm not exaggerating this to you when I tell you this, and this is a factual story. As I'm mouthing these words, 2 people walked in with an older man. Both of them clearly were fighting cancer somehow. Both had lost their hair. One of the ladies had a bonnet on, and they were barely moving in. Both walked by our table and gave me the most warm greeting, the warmest smile as a stranger. And he goes, that's pretty freaking pathetic. You can't find anything in your life to be grateful for right now? And on the drive home, I'm not kidding you, I started to stack gratitude. I started to take inventory. Because if you can find things to be grateful for in that space, man, is your life going to be rich when there really are external things to be grateful for. So my first mechanism out of that space was honestly to stack the things I was grateful for, and I started reinforcing it over and over and over again. And what happens is there's this reticular activating system in our brains, right? And all of a sudden, because that's the messaging I was giving myself, all of a sudden, all these things start to come into my awareness that I'm grateful for. I start to magnetize to myself some people that I needed to find into my life, and that was the next layer. I started to see things to be grateful for. My health, my fitness, people who loved me. And what it did is it changed my state. When I stacked gratitude, I changed what I did in the morning, and I changed what I did in the evening. And so somehow by grabbing control of my morning and by grabbing control of my evening, I got some measure of control over the middle of my day. I was an out of control person back in those days, meaning this: I woke up worried, stressed, fearful, and I immediately start thinking about a bill I had to pay, something that was wrong, and I'm in a state of reaction to begin I'm talking within 6 minutes of waking up, 6 seconds. Most people listening to this, that's what they do. I said, I got to grab control of my morning, and I set up routines in my morning. Maybe they served me, maybe they didn't, but they were things I could deliver on doing for myself. And so not only did that give me control over the day, but I started to stack my self-confidence too.
How in the depths of your despair did you become okay with trying something that you knew might fail? Like, how did you build yourself back up? You know, the daily practice, was that the answer? Like, you, in your book, Choose Yourself, you do this extraordinary walkthrough of a kid reaches out to you and he's like at that place where he's just on the floor. There's no getting up. There's even, you said, even asking him to floss a single tooth would have been asking too much. And how do you build back from that? How did you build back from that?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's happened more than once to me. Sometimes I would do things right and I'd get back up and I'd be disciplined and you know, I would find opportunities and some success again and then lose it again, lose everything to zero after making millions again. And I remember one time I had built and sold a second company, or maybe this was the third company, and I was lying in a hammock and I realized I just had lost everything again. And the hammock was in between these two houses I had bought on this nice piece of property overlooking the Hudson River, and it was raining and I just didn't feel like getting up because it was just, where was I gonna go? I had nothing to do, nothing going on, nothing to hope for. And I was just like, why did this happen again? And I started to just bit by bit piece it together. Like, where did I feel pleasure on the way up in such a way that, oh, if I keep doing this, if I keep hitting the accelerator on this activity, good things will happen. And that's what I call in Choose Yourself, I call it this daily practice that now just every day I make sure I factor in these 4 things. I'll say the 4 things, but then I'll say how from the beginning you can do it. So the 4 things that I started doing, and again, this was just me, I mean, it might work for others, might not. Am I getting a little better in terms of physical health? Now, as you age, your physical health changes, is different, but I'm at least attempting to understand and essentially eat, move, sleep better every day. Emotional health. You know, so many times I thought, I have a business opportunity with this guy. Not such a great person. I could see there's some toxicity around him, but this opportunity seems really huge. So I better ignore the bad sides of this person and focus on the opportunity. Those situations never, ever, like 0 of those situations worked out. And so you know, every day do I think, am I eliminating toxic people from my life and focusing on positive people who I love and want to support, and they love and want to support me? And then every day you could tweak that like a bonsai tree. There's always people moving in and out of your life, and you could always tweak it. And so that's emotional health.